And so I wanted to welcome you to our open source working group. This is a group that's where we launched this group about a year ago to help our different developers see the entire ecosystem of OHDSI. We have groups that focus mostly in R on our background Hades package. We've got groups that are doing a lot of web development with Java and JavaScript with Atlas and Web API. We have groups doing all kinds of stuff throughout for network studies, and so we wanted to build a process where we kind of see all of our packages. We have close to 200 repos in GitHub. We've got 13 million lines of code. We've got hundreds of active contributors. And so we wanted to really start having a discussion for how do we look at the big picture. So our three main goals for this group is, one is we have started a new contributor training program, which we call the Chiron Project, where we have 25 individuals who are committed to putting time into learning how to develop on OHDSI in one of the projects. And so we've been going around building up their development environment, building out. Adam's put together several great tutorials along with Anthony Senna for how to run a network study, how to stand up Atlas and Web API, and we've even run a documentathon a few weeks ago. And so one of our goals is to onboard new contributors. We're also working on trying to measure the health of our repos. Which of our repos are in cruise control? Which ones are growing? Which ones need help as part of their maturity? And then lastly, we're here to talk about governance. What is the OHDSI way? What are the conventions we want to use as a community to think about how we do licensing, how we try to identify the needs of the community using our software, and how do we make sure that we have a sustainable pathway for making as much of an impact in the field as we can. So those are our three main goals for this group. We've had a lot of fun discussions. They are all recorded. We put several of them on YouTube, but it's really been a fun process going through trying to demystify OHDSI, because I learn something every week. Because there's a lot of different technology pieces, and there's a lot gets added to OHDSI. There's always new packages being added, and so there's always new growth that we're dealing with. So anyway, so that's our background. I know you know us. It was great to see you at the OHDSI conference. We're thrilled to have you part of our community, and I was just really taken aback by how much thought you have given in Bioconductor for how you went about the process of forming governance within the group. And so I was hoping you can give us a little bit of background. I see that you guys go back 20 years. You guys have been doing this for a while. And I kind of think of what are the different epochs of eras for Bioconductor as stages in its maturity as a community platform that now has 35,000 publications using its software. Oh, you're on mute. Oh, I can't hear you.
So yeah, it's probably more than that, I think. I don't know. So Bioconductor was established was established by Robert Gentleman, who also wrote R. So Robert Gentleman would have wrote R in the late 1990s with Ross Ithaca, and then he moved to Harvard in early 2000 and he wrote Bioconductor. He was in the biostats department in Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. And that's where he wrote Bioconductor along with Vince Carey and a lot of the other people who were working on the early days of genomics. And it really provided a platform for us to share statistical methods for the analysis of genomic data. At that stage, we were coming out of kind of the early phases, like out of the Human Genome Project, and we were beginning to build large-scale analysis of genomics data. I have a couple of slides that I put together. I don't know whether that's going to be useful or not, which I kind of tried to structure, like, I don't know what you would find most useful or least useful. but I can share that. So like
Yeah, please
Bioconductor
do.
started
That's
around 2000, 2001, and I got involved with it pretty early on. When I wrote my first methods, I wrote them first in Python, and then I realized that there was a growing community using R for the statistical analysis of genomics data. So then I wrote my package for Bioconductor at the time.
Oh, nice. Yeah, feel free to share your slides. I think that sounds great. I've got about 5,000 questions, and so hopefully this will answer a few of those, and then we can zero in on some others.
Can somebody? I'll post the slide link in the chat because there's a lot of links on the slide, but I can't find the chat for some reason. I'm on multiple teams and the chat windows disappears. So
Yeah.
Can somebody write something on the chat and then it will pop up?
So I put in a link to the Bioconductor annual report in our chat, but it's really tied to our open source working group Teams channel inside of the OHDSI tenant. If you want to email me the slides, I can share them that way if you can't share them directly.
Okay, well, I think I should be able to share them directly, but I can email you the link. I was going to just post it on whatever the channel is. So I'm
happy to do that.
But I am there. I've just sent you the link. So so there's a couple of bits in this. So this is kind of, it's not like I kind of was putting together, some of it isn't as organized as probably as it should be. But I'm happy to share it as well and just actually present it.
I think that's a good overall statement of open source governance. It's not as always as organized as it should be.
Yeah, it isn't. Let's see if I can find it on this here. I have way too many windows open. Bioconductor slides, Google Slides. Okay, let's see if this is sharing. Is that sharing or not sharing? I don't know.
That is. Yeah.
Okay, so you can see Bioconductor?
I can.
Okay, I don't know if I make this slideshow, will it all disappear? So is it better to leave it like this in not proper slideshow mode?
I think you should give it a shot. We'll let you know.
Okay.
That looks great.
Okay, brilliant, great. So what is Bioconductor? Basically, it was a project that was started in 2000, 2001. It's a global open source, open development software in R. We have over 2,000 developers, and we have a core team that maintain about 3,000 packages. And there's multiple links down here to kind of some of the books that we've done, some videos, and then basically like some statistics about our downloads. So some people will argue it's the largest bioinformatic project. I don't know. It's difficult to really tell. But we work within the R ecosystem. So, all of our documentation is written in Markdown. We have a lot of Shiny apps. We're available we use a lot of Jupyter. And then within the we've also been working within a lot of cloud computing. So we work within the Terra and Anvil platform, which was originally built on Google Cloud, but now is available for other clouds. And it's basically a layer between sort of the cloud and that provides kind of easy workflows for biologists to analyze data. We do free code reviews. We have this whole package system with integration of all of the data with daily checks, and we have a 6-month cycle where packages are submitted to the package. They go through a developmental branch, and then once they pass our command check and Bioconductor check, and go through code review, they basically go into the package. If at some point in time, so this is kind of like just on our system, kind of what we have. So we'll say this at the moment, this is the 3.16 is the devel version, 3.8, 3.15 is the release version, and there's basically there's these build checks for all of the packages. We used to do them every single day for everything, but now we kind of, some things are on different days of the week. So we build on all of the different systems, so Mac, Linux, Windows, and then different varieties of those, and all of the packages and all of the dependencies are checked. We check it using unit testing, and we also, every single package is required to have a vignette. So a vignette is basically a tutorial that brings in sample data set and runs through a workflow using that package. So it should describe what are the different tools within the package. And that's been something that's required within Bioconductor, but it's not necessarily within R, which is something that I think, everybody within Bioconductor really likes, because the first thing you see a package, you go straight to the vignette and you kind of go, right, what does this thing do? So what does a workflow with this package look like? Kind of what sort of data can I analyze with it? We have quite a big community. We kind of didn't realize, I think, how big we had grown. So I suppose, with most of these, we tended to be kind of North America, European centric, and we're trying to better support our global community now. So far this year, we've had about, almost 1 million downloads. These are like the number of people on the support site. On Slack. Slack is really kind of what we use for active discussions among developers, and it's been really useful for developers to just start, new types of data are released within the genomics community pretty frequently. And, people then saying, okay, how do we develop a class structure for this? Now, I'm going to jump because I didn't really do this. So what do I mean by a class structure? So this is kind of just an indication of how we kind of organize some of the software. So we have, every package gets this BioC views. It's just like a tag. And then that allows us to basically provide a kind of search option. So we realized when we were getting more and more packages, it was becoming complicated for people. So we created tags, and then you pick so many tags that are associated with your package, or you can create new tags. And then basically it allows people to go through packages, for example, here to find ones associated with single cell. The other thing that we have within the ecosystem, which allows it to work well, is we have standardized classes. And that means that then people can build methods that work with the class and know that the class structure is stable. So in our case, what we tend to have, we have a lot of matrices that are coming. These are the data out of the experiments, and these tend to have associated row and column annotation. And this is and so then we have a lot of methods that work on these classes, such that when you subset one matrix, you immediately subset the other matrices as well, and you don't get that disassociation between these, that you have these kind of classes. And then these classes have built, into multi-assay experiments. And then with single cell, we had different requirements for spatial data. We need to have spatial coordinates. So we've basically extended these classes. Okay, sorry to jump here, but I should have put that in the right place. So so those are kind of the core things behind Bioconductor, I suppose, is basically the build system, the class system, the vignettes, and the repository system. So as I said, we've got a lot of community. How do we work? Please stop me at any point in time, by the way, and just ask me questions. I don't mind.
Well, I think this is a good one to stop at, because I'm interested. I think this is an incredible success, but I kind of want to know this didn't really happen until 2020, right? The Community Advisory Board. And so I want to know, it'd be great to know some of the...
TAB was established much earlier. So the TAB was established early 2000s. So the TAB has been in place a long, long time. And
you need the TAB for survival. But what I'm interested in is, as you go through your different phases, what were the growing pains? What were the problems with the unmanaged? What was unmanageable that forced the creation of these different advisory boards?
So the technical advisory board and the scientific advisory board were really established very early on. So the Bioconductor has been funded by one core big NHGRI grant for a long time. And the PI of the grant was like the leader. And then the technical advisory board was people like developers that were very active in the community, who were basically advising the core team about problems that they had with core classes and core infrastructure in the project. And that was critical for the establishment of a stable ecosystem for basically building the packages and development of the class structure that we have so that we can share and grow as a community. Scientific Advisory Board is obviously the external advisory board.
And so, I'm sorry, for the technical advisory
what was
board?
happening in the tab was that the tab was dealing with a lot of community issues. So the tab was involved in kind of coordination of the annual meetings and, you know, like sorting out some of the education and training. And the tab at one point is going, you know what, we're actually not doing the technical side of things. We're doing a lot of community engagement stuff. And it's taking up a lot. So we need to form a second board, which will just focus on the community side of things. So the technical board can get back to what their original goal was, which was advising the core team and the core set of developers.
And you would say that the primary mission of the tab is to ensure that you've got a stable, supportable package, right?
Yeah, because it's you know, with 3,000 plus R packages, it's quite a big it's a whole ecosystem. You know, we've got links into Python, we've got a lot of other software architecture, a lot of it is written in C. So there's a lot of dependencies. So the core team maintain the infrastructure. The tab is really supposed to be the ones that are deciding, you know, we need to form a working group to look at these new data types, or managing kind of some of the cloud migration stuff that we're trying to do, or what other things talking about, we'll say, one of the issues that we're having at the moment is these very, very large sparse matrices that are computationally expensive, and how do we better develop methods that can allow us to deal with sparse matrix computations. So there's a lot of stuff like that. It's the core, and the core team would work very closely also with some of the R core team as well.
So I would say, so I saw maintain infrastructure, also developing the review process for packages to be accepted, right?
Yeah.
And so I also would imagine with your thousands of packages, there's got to be a lot of standards that you might be creating around intermediate objects that could be reusable for different purposes. So it's like we have a lot of we have CIRCE, we have a lot of JSON objects that we use that are outputs from one piece of software that are inputs for another.
Yeah, it's slightly different, I think, workflow of data, how we work maybe. But so there's a lot of connectivity to global databases, but it's slightly, yeah. Anyway, the Community Advisory Board established 2019. We kind of at the end of 2019, we did the elections during 2019, and then. So I'm going to go talk a lot more about the Community Advisory Board, and also I don't know if you're interested in kind of the fiscal side of things. So the foundation.
Very much so. Sustainability is a great part. How did you run in an election before you had the CAB? Is there an annual meeting where you had people raise hands?
So what we did is we nominated two people that had been on the tab. So that was myself and Matt Ritchie. And we established kind of the Community Advisory Board. And then we basically did a call to the community. We did an open nomination process. We don't have a society thing with lots of members. We basically just do open calls to open calls on we basically make announcements on the support site, on Twitter, like we have a developers mailing list. We've got a couple of different ways that we reach out to the community, and we made open calls and saying, anybody want to be on the Community Advisory Board? And then we actually selected members to represent the diversity within the project. So what we wanted like gender diversity, geographical, career stage diversity, and in fact, what we ended up having to do is actually reaching out to some of those communities. We felt we didn't have enough representation in Africa. So we actually reached out to those communities and said, like, would somebody, who in the Bioconductor will actually, we felt we needed to actually like actively represent all of the different communities. And
You
then once you
mentioned-
have somebody there who is the person that people can go to, then it actually, you know, then now we're getting, you know, nominations from these places. But before that, we actually had to reach out actively.
And so you said gender, geographic. What was the third one? You said a career or
Career stage. Yeah, so we want people at both junior and senior level. We don't want just senior people within the project. We want people at different career stages. So those are the different, there might be some other like diversity issues we think, but those are the three main ones. We wanted people, and we also wanted many different languages represented, because we realized that people learn in different languages. And when we reached out to the community, this was one of the things that we recognized was a problem, was that nearly all of our documentation is written in English. And so we're actively now engaging in how do we actually translate. And also when we're organizing meetings, to make sure, one of the things we hadn't been doing was when we were doing meetings, we weren't like thinking about closed captioning software, like automatic translation and closed captioning software. And those were things when we started engaging in BioCE Asia, we realized, you know, Google is a problem, you know, the way people share information. For example, Instagram is really big in Brazil. So, you know, we were using Meetup in North America, but that was never going to work in Europe, where people use Facebook. You know, we're realizing that different tools are used in different places, and really that we need the local community to tell us what works for them and what they need. One of the things I can talk a little bit about, like what the first thing that we did then was seek funding to support basically some of the outreach we did. We got funding through the Chan Zuckerberg Essential Open Source Software Funding Program, which funds open source software projects. And that's allowed us then to join carpentries, the software carpentries. So we're training 30 instructors in the carpentries. We're developing like training programs in the carpentries, and the idea is that those local instructors will help us translate the material, and so we can give it locally. And the other thing is we have a requirement. We have a very developed Code of Conduct Committee. We've had the Code of Conduct Committee be part of meetings for many years, and we have a requirement that if you're holding a meeting that's related to what we do, that you have a translation of the Code of Conduct for your region before you actually can have a meeting. So then we've been translating the Code of Conduct. And we're also been doing translate-a-thons to translate things as well.
And can you just talk about how did so I get how there was an open nomination, but was there an actual election where people voted for different candidates? It's because we're like you are. We don't really have the membership is open. We don't have membership dues. We want to be as inclusive as possible. So how did you poll the?
So the first cab was very much us actively going out to the community. In, you know, some people, you know, and basically we had an open call, but then we realized we didn't have representation in certain parts of the world. And so we actually actively went out and recruited people from those parts of the world, like saying, okay, who's working in this area, who would like to be involved, this is what we're doing. So we actually did a bit of outreach in order to get those nominations. Since then, we haven't had to do as much outreach because we have, I think, that diversity from the start. And we now just do an open call. We normally get about 3 to 4 times the number of nominations that we need, and then we actually just do a vote. It's a secret ballot within the existing members as to who's going to join. And normally, what we're looking for is, you know, how is this person engaging in their local community, and what can they bring to us? What new community can they bring to us that we're not already reaching? And people are elected for a 3-year term to either the TAB or the CAB. And after a 3-year term, people can opt for re-election. And we're every because of the way we had a little bit of a starting thing with the CAB, that we had 10 members and then we joined on another 5. And so then this year at the moment, we've got more members than we should, but people will come to the end of that first 3-year term at the end of this year, and we'll be back to 15 members. And the idea is every year, 5 members rotate. And so then we have a rotation through the boards. You can't serve as an officer on the board, like, you know, chair or secretary, until you've been on the board for a year. The CAB changes the chair and secretary. We've a chair, co-chair, or vice chair. It tends to be co-chair. We tend to have co-chairs for the CAB, and the tab has a chair and a vice chair. And then we've got secretary, and those are the 3 positions that we have in both boards. The TAB has opted to have those positions for a 3-year term. The CAB does it for a year. So again, we've changed a little bit, diverged a little bit from our initial governance documents. So we need to probably reconnect back and harmonize those again. One of the so this is just a link to a video. Laurie did a really good video about Bioconductor. So one of the things that we have as well is then that there's a lot of working groups. So some of those working groups were called committees because they're long-standing. So we've got like code of conduct, education, the conference committees. We've got 3 annual conferences, Bioconductor in North America, Europe, and Asia. But then a lot of them are for specific purposes. And so we've been trying to work out, how do we manage the hierarchy and the organization of the working groups and the advisory committee, and how do we do all of that? So we've engaged with other open source communities. So Galaxy is one committee or one project. So Galaxy, again, is a bioinformatics project. It's a global project, and they have a web front end. So they have kind of a different architecture in how they actually distribute their code and their software. And obviously a lot of Bioconductor packages are part of Galaxy. Galaxy also has a much different user base. So it's a lot of the meteorological community and the physicists, and in addition to bioinformatics, use Galaxy because it's got a really nice web front end. You can load Jupyter notebooks through it. You can add code to it. It's actually quite a nice front end. So this was the structure that they came up with for their organization, that basically there's various different working groups, and a member of the working group then sits on the boards, and then the boards report to an executive. So for the past 2 years with the CAB, we've been trying to see how the pros and cons of this model. So within the CAB, within the Community Advisory Board, everybody has to be on a working group. You can be on one or more working groups, and there isn't a requirement that you join the CAB and immediately join a working group. You can kind of, get to the feel for how we work, and then over the first 6 months, kind of identify an area that you'd like to champion. And that's been working quite well, because it has led to the establishment of a lot of working groups, which is then bringing in more of the community, because each working group brings in more people. But we're also realizing that working groups have a finite span. They're normally set up for a purpose and then disbanded after that purpose. So there's 2 models here. And so one is we have the CAB, and the CAB kind of start the working groups, and then, people come onto the working groups, and then we disband working groups when they've kind of come to the end of their purpose. Or you have a model where the working groups then are all elected onto the CAB. And so the model there with Galaxy was that the working groups, a member of the working groups then sit on the CAB. That can be problematic sometimes. So there's pros and cons to these different models. So if somebody's on the advisory board and then the working group finishes, do they then no longer sit on the advisory board? But then you have elections, and then how does that all work together? And then for some of the working groups that maybe aren't as active, you know, they may not have that start and end. So I think we're working out what the best approach here at the moment is. And we've also worked within the CAB. When we started the meeting, you know, we devoted a long time to talking about working groups, you know, and the different working groups, and each working group would give a report. But then those meetings got a little bit boring because it was just like, oh, here's what we're doing, da 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 da, and then you're going, oh, okay, now we actually need to think about strategy, you know, building community, where we're going, and we didn't have enough time to do that. So then we said, right, we'll put all of the working groups into a separate minutes document and only bring up if there's issues. But then that took a lot of the momentum from the working groups when people didn't have to report every month. So sorry, I meant to mention both the TAB and the CAB meet monthly. And so now we're going to a thing whereby we have 2 working groups present each month. And that seems to be kind of maybe working a bit better. And then we also have it that, you know, anybody in the community can propose to establish a working group. And then we can establish it. So we're definitely not, we haven't this all worked out. But that's kind of where we're working with things at the moment. I don't know if you've got.
Yeah, this is great. I'm just wondering, do you have like training for new working group leads or leadership development for them for how to engage their participants or motivate members?
No. No, our community tends to be really engaged. Sorry, this is just a picture of who's actually, you were asking about the makeup of the advisory board. This is the current advisory board. No, we don't have any training. We have engaged with an organization called the CSCCE, which is, I had a slide that I think I may have put in at the end, did I? Oh, I just put the link there. Okay, it's the cscce.org. And I think I have their logo. This was like some of our plans for the first year. So the CSCCE is a training organization, and what they do is it's specifically for open source software developers. So our OHDSI kind of introduced us to them, and also CZI, the Cancer Board, which are funding some of our outreach. So what they do is they'll train community managers, and they will they go through this whole onboarding process. And so part of the training, the community manager will actually have, you know, weekly sessions where they're trained on different aspects. But at the same time, what they do is they analyze the community. And at the end of that, that's kind of my slide, so I'll stop sharing. At the end of that session, you end up with like a profile of your community, who's in your community, where are you doing well. They have a whole kind of ethos around how to build community for open source projects, from where basically you're providing something and people are using it, to basically people are using and building code and expanding the project. And so we've engaged with them, and so we've a new community manager who just started, who's working with me here. And so her job is really to analyze the bioconductor community and work out you know, where we're falling down and where we can do better. And you know where our outreach is working. And so she'll be engaging with the CSCCE as part of her training, but also in how to actually develop kind of both this profile of the project and also a contributor's guide. Because what we haven't got, and what we probably, I know Odyssey do this, I think, better than we you know, we've kind of like, you know, there's been a lot of experienced developers in the project, and they kind of don't see the flaws in the system for brand new people. So our onboarding for new people isn't as smooth and as simple as it should be. So we recognize that we have to redevelop our website and redevelop a lot of our documentation so it's simpler for new people, because the project has got so much bigger and complex. It's not just a case of look at these 3R packages or even these 25R packages and it'll get you started. You know, there's the ecosystem of the packages, what's been developed, what are legacy, you know, is actually way more complex. And I think just the genomics data analysis, you know, is actually just more complex than what it was 20 years ago.
That's fantastic. And I have, so if anyone has any questions, please ask. I don't have to ask all the questions. I just have a lot of questions. So feel free to add it in the chat. I'll make sure you'll get to be asked the next question. I did want to talk about finances though. So certainly you're describing some things like CZI, and clearly that's a funded service. And so understanding what things are paid for, what things are volunteer, and how did you build that business model? Is it still funded by a central NIH type of model, or how is it being sustained?
So, like, there's very few people paid to do anything with Bioconductor. It's all a community pretty much entirely. So there's an NHGRI grant which funds about half a dozen core developers. And the PIs that supervise them. There's also maybe a couple of people who've got like individual grants for maybe packages that they're developing themselves, but that's not like organized centrally.
Right.
And then the grant that I got from CZI, from Chan Zuckerberg, Essential Open Source Software, is just for community development. So that basically supports Maria to be our community manager and to actually look at our community outreach. And that's it. That's the only people that are paid.
But you're engaging
it's pretty much entirely volunteers.
So the CZI training was interesting to me, in training folks on how to work on collaborative project management like that. That is also something that is available without funding.
The CZI, so basically the CZI grant that we got funds membership of the carpentries, funds membership of CSCCE so we can get that training, and funds Maria's salary. And there's funding there for web development as well. That's it. And then we basically have the NIH and the core grants, which fund the core developers.
And so the core developers, can you talk a little about their role and how they work with the volunteers?
So basically the build system is a big project. You know, we've had multiple migrations in that. It started in the old days, it was on SVN. We migrated it to Git. Now we're looking at it, and we have a build system that runs every night on it. We're looking to see how we can use GitHub Actions to automate some of that. So there's a lot, and then we also have a lot of data packages that we maintain, and those are on the cloud. We've got egress costs from that we need to fix. We shouldn't be paying egress costs. You know, so there's the annotation packages. So we build a lot of annotation packages for, we say, genome annotation. We've got about 3,000 or 4,000 annotation packages as well. So a lot of those were contributed by various different people, and then we maintain them. So the developers are pretty busy. They also maintain the website. They maintain the support site. What else do they do? They also then write classes with the community to improve the speed of some of the computations we're doing.
Okay, and how do you rate? Here's the other good question. So you've got several thousand packages now. How do you raise the standards on the quality of those packages? Now, the CAB comes together and says, you know what, everyone needs to have a README file for their package, or they need to have a contributor guideline. And how do you enforce that policy amongst those 3,000 packages?
They're not accepted if they don't have it.
And so what if they're grandfathered in? What if you just come up with a new policy that says, you know what, we really want to get translations, or we want to have the other parts of the.
So we're looking at some of this at the moment, actually, because we're looking at the licensing. So, you know, all the packages are supposed to have open licensing, but, you know, I think there's a hell of a lot of people that don't understand licensing, and some people do artistic and some people do CC-BY and, whatever. And we're supposed to have OSI compliant licensing. So we're actually reviewing what our licensing is at the moment. And so we're working with, we have an industry working group and they're very keen on this. So they've taken on the task of writing documentation about what licenses are. And then we have a couple of active developers in the TAB who've basically gone through all the packages and checked what licenses we have. And then by and large, I think about 95% of our packages are compliant. But we're going to have to I think the way people have written down what the license was, it wasn't that it was, pick one of these categories. It was just write them in. So, you've got various different versions and different things. So I think we're going to have to bump people up. So within the repository, we have we bump the packages versions every single time we do the develop the release. So it'll probably go out as we're actually, updating the licensing. You are required to do this, otherwise we're going to probably do this. If this is a problem, let us know, we'll work with you, whatever. But yeah, that's something we haven't worked out exactly how we're going to do it, but that is something that we're going to have to do at the moment.
So let me see if I think I got it. So basically, as you come up with a new package release, you can say, here are the new criteria for that package release if you want to be included. Is that?
No, we don't. The package release criteria have been set quite a while ago. So when a package it comes in, so they have to pass our command check and BioC check. And BioC check has additional requirements. So we have additional documentation requirements. We have unit testing requirements. There will be packages that will have got into the system before that, and those are grandfathered. With those packages that are grandfathered, they get away with it. We can be, at some point in time, we may have to think about, if some packages are really not there. But I think luckily we started a lot of our BioC check hasn't changed much in a long time. We kind of put in a certain amount of requirements. We have if you go to the website, there's kind of a thing about the ranking of how frequent the package is downloaded and, what its coverage is and things like this to kind of encourage people. I have to say my code's really bad with unit testing.
I actually like that.
And it was grandfathered in. So, there's there isn't the approach has traditionally been to be as inclusive as possible. And the idea, I think the idea that you write one perfect package is idealistic, but probably not realistic. Because, even if you listen to Hadley Wickham talk, there's multiple if we look at the multiple iterations of dplyr, it's gone through and so I think that's what happens with a lot of packages is you write it the first time and you realize the problems with it, then you write it again. And so, what happens?
I agree with the mentality of build twice because you will anyway.
Yeah.
I think that is classic. And
so what happens is that some packages just don't get used very much anymore. And then other packages take over. And then the other ones are kind of legacy packages, but we haven't removed them because some people may still depend on them some way or other just because of there's a lot of people that would be doing sort of stuff for FDA approval. And if they used a certain suite of packages or in industry, people will have used a certain suite of packages. And even though things have moved on since then, that still needs to be fully reproducible. So in the conferences, we've focused a lot on how to do reproducible science, how to create Docker instance of all of the versions, how to containerize things, you know, how to work out what the dependencies are. So we tend to have our conferences that there's like one full day, which is kind of a developers day, or there's a lot, and there's a lot of workshops on how to do what is now considered best in class analysis.
And just lastly, so what about if a code scanning vulnerability analysis, is that done on the command check? If you're looking for dependencies that might potentially have a vulnerability to end users in the package.
What do you mean by vulnerability?
Security vulnerabilities?
I don't know. I don't know. We run, so we have our command check, which literally just checks, have you got documentation? We do a manual code review. And we have community volunteers who help with the code review. They all go through a process of this is how you do a code review. And then all the code review is on GitHub, so it's all open as well. So if there's any issues with that, the Code of Conduct Committee hear about it, or somebody else hears about it.
Yeah,
so,
it'd more likely be with a dependency, but yes.
But like, you know, if there has been in the past maybe somebody who has a lot of dependencies, or maybe dependencies, because we have to bring in the dependencies into the build system. And so there has been things in the past going, well, actually the license on that is a problem. You can't have this license on this because your dependency has a different license. So that's obviously an issue in some cases. So I don't know. I think Vince might be a better person to talk about if we really want to get into the vulnerabilities of everything. So, you know, those are what we have in place is literally the manual code review, the automatic code review, and then the fact that all the packages have to have the documentation and the vignettes. But yeah, there's probably gaps and holes and things that we haven't even thought about. We're just hoping that the fact that everything is open, somebody else might spot it, I suppose.
Also, the manual code review has got to be a great is a great practice. Adam, you had a question?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks so much, Adeline, for coming to talk to us. It's like really, really great information. I was going to ask about you know, this process of onboarding new packages and kind of how you kind of maintain this balance between being open and inclusive while at the same time trying to have standardized structures. It could be like code style, function and argument names, common use of classes. Like, how do you walk that balance between those two things?
So, like, I remember years ago kind of having this discussion with Martin Morgan, who was the project lead for a while, and he was going, well, it's not his view at the time was very much, it's not my job to define what people call things, because, you know, we can set best practice, but, you know, people may actually prefer something else. And if people don't like it, they won't use it. It was kind of, you know, the things that work well, the packages with better documentation will get used more. And so kind of the good and the bad will actually sort itself out. We have found that Slack has been really, really useful for, we said there's been a couple of instances where we'll say when single cell data came on board, the community started talking, we need to develop a class to support this new data type. And there was some really good just community engagement who developed, you know, those standards. We have tried to, we will, when we do code review, if people aren't using the Bioconductor classes, we will ask them to have their package to support Bioconductor classes. They may support classes that are outside of our system. But we'll ask that, you know, they support the class structures that we have. And we will show them and guide them through kind of how to do that S4, how to write the code so it supports the S4 class structures. And that has been useful because it then means that the date, you know, if somebody that then writes a new class, it just extends the previous class, but it means that everything that worked on that class and the new class, like on the older class, will still work. So it does provide that kind of stability in the project when we have classes. Now, not everybody likes the fact that we use S4 classes. It's not sort of tidyverse compatible so much. But for our ecosystem, we have found that it makes shareability between methods much easier, because everybody then is obviously, like, if you've got a data set and you're calling, you know, a matrix or whatever, and you're calling the annotations associated with the rows and the columns, you're just calling like row data, col data, and those are all consistent then across all of the packages.
I did have another question. I'm not sure it's a 6-minute question though. I was super interested in the process. You looked at the Apache way, you've looked at Eclipse Foundations and NumFocus as part of this journey of trying to figure out how to define your governance models and whether you wanted to have a foundation. Can you, I don't know, this will probably be more of a segue into the next call that we have with you, but I don't know if you can briefly talk about.
I've got I don't know if you saw there that there's like one thing where I've got like a little bit about the foundations, and there's a link there. That's a link to a whole other presentation.
I bet it is, yeah.
So there's like whatever. So yes, so we have a foundation in a 503c. I think it's 503c.
And what drove you to decide the need to create one?
That was originally created because there was a book written and there was royalties from the book. So it was a book on how to use Bioconductor. We'd royalties from it. And the idea was we needed someplace to put the royalties so that they'd be available to the project. Then the other thing that is used for is for managing sponsorship. So we get sponsorship for our annual meetings. You know, and obviously it moves around, where we move the meeting every single year, different institutes hosting it, and we need to be able to take the sponsorship money in and pay and pay for the catering and the venue and everything else that you need to do. So that's pretty much what the foundation is used for. And then we also have a European Bioconductor Society, and that was actually set up under European club law, and that is actually creating the same purpose. It's literally to take in the sponsorship money from the conference and to allow us to actually host the conference. But like, we've realized there's some limitations in the way that we had done that. Particularly when BioC Asia needed us to be able to take some of their sponsorship money, and we didn't quite know when we're working as a global organization, how do we manage sponsorship money from local conferences? So our collaborators in Australia had been taking it, but then when the conference moved to Japan, there was like, you know, hesitancy about Australia managing money. When it was in Japan, it was kind of got complicated. So then it was like, could North America manage it? And so how do you manage kind of, you know, these money when you're working globally? So that's the reason why we started looking to see if we could get a fiscal sponsor. And so I did a review of many different open source communities to see who do they use as their fiscal sponsor. And most open source communities do have a fiscal sponsor, and that's what those slides are. And within at least our community, kind of NumFocus is the project that seems to be gaining and one that seems to have a lot of advantages.
That was great. Thank you so much. That was a fantastic conversation. I don't know how I can ask another question that you can answer in under 3 minutes, quite frankly. But that was really great to get that background. There's so much in common with our communities, and it's really exciting to see how you've tried to help build processes for the developers to be part of the whole process of the software development and the decision making around it.
Yeah, so one of the things that we've done recently, which has actually been a good thing to do, is we've done a developer mentorship program. So it's pairing, we've created a program to pair seasoned developers with more novice developers. So developers who have something on GitHub, which isn't quite a package. It might maybe be in our package, but it's not a bioconductor package, and to kind of ease them through that cycle and show them best practice. So we've taken some of our really good seasoned developers, and we have 12 developers coaching 6 novice developers. And you know, the goal is get that package into the next development cycle, and you know, can we get packages in? And it also is a really good way to test our documentation.
Mhm.
So where are the holes? If you're working with somebody who's struggling with the documentation, they're the best people to tell you where the holes are and where we actually need to improve. So that's one thing that we've been doing recently to try to improve kind of onboarding of new developers.
Yeah, I like that. So we're trying to do that here as a cohort where they can learn from mentors as well as from each other. So that where I'm sure they can learn as much, if not more, from each other going through the process.
Yeah.
We also participate in semesters of code, which is kind of like a light open source engineering course for undergraduate students. We find that's also helpful in trying to think about how we boot up developers entirely outside of our domain into our projects.
Yeah. Yep. So we've taken part in like Google Summer Code. We're working with Outreachy, and we've also done Hacktoberfest. Is a one that's going on at the moment.
That's very that's apropos for October. That sounds great. Excellent. So we are out of time, but that was just a fantastic conversation. I want to continue it. I'd like to keep you involved, and we're just thrilled to have you as part of our OHDSI community, where we can learn from some of the practices of Bioconductor.
Yeah, and I just want to. This is Patrick. I just want to thank you. This was the most enlightening meeting I've had all week, and very inspiring. We have so much to learn from you and your community. So I really want to thank you for sharing this with us. It's been tremendous.
No worries, and happy to introduce you to other people that might help you as well.
That's
Awesome.
great. Yeah,
thank you.
We're in a couple of weeks. We're going to bring in the group that put together the ITAR open source sustainability wheel for governance, and so we're going to talk about how they formed that documentation for evaluating open source communities. So, but yeah, we're eager to network with other communities in our space, and also in some larger areas outside of our space that we want to be able to partner with, and to see how to catalyze our activities to be the most effective for our developers.
Yeah, no, it's really important that we all learn from each other.
Yeah, thank you. Well, great. Have a great day, and we'll see everyone in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Take care.